Hey everybody, and welcome back. Today we're talking about boundary setting, specifically the three main mistakes I see people make time and time again when it comes to setting boundaries that work for them in their relationships, in their business, or really anywhere in life. And if you feel like you can relate, where you either have a hard time even initiating and setting boundaries with the people you care about or the ones you work with, or when you do set them, they don't always go the way you want, today is a video for you. We'll be covering the three mistakes and ways that you can overcome them to really make boundaries that actually create the life you want, and how to overcome any of that interior resistance we all have when it comes to setting boundaries that might make ourselves uncomfortable. If that sounds good to you, then please keep on watching, and don't forget to press like and subscribe below so you never miss out on a future episode. My name is Craig Cassidy, and this is Coaching Naked. Hey everybody, and welcome back to Coaching Naked, the place to get real about the life you actually want to live. Get raw about the shit in your way and take the steps and healing necessary to create results like you've never seen before. My name is Craig Cassidy, and I'm your executive life, relationship, and business coach. That's right, everything from the boardroom to the bedroom we'll be talking about today. Here, committed to help you live a life filled with pleasure and purpose. And today we're doing that by talking about boundary setting and how you can really transform your relationships with boundaries to actually have them reinforce the life you want to be living. Now, before we dive into the top three mistakes I see people making when it comes to setting boundaries, I want to share this. It seems like culturally, we as a people have forgotten how to set boundaries, or we just never learned. When I'm talking with people in the office place, at startups, or even when they're working on their family relationships, it seems like the lessons we're being taught on repeat is your boundaries don't matter, or we reward people for not having boundaries. I look at my first few jobs where I was praised for working outside of my normal 40-hour work week and not being paid for it because it shows what an effective, competent worker I was, even when that's really not the best thing for my physical, emotional, or mental well-being. The same can be said in family dynamics, where sometimes we actually are taught that love looks like martyrdom, where we have to actually give up our boundaries in order to show that we're a good family member, to be a good parent, to be a good sibling, whatever it might be. And the truth is, this couldn't be further from the case. Boundaries are an act of self-love as much as they are an act of love for everybody else. When we show up in the world and we actually put boundaries in place that support the life we want, and people get to see that, we're giving them permission to do the same. So if you have a bit of a strained relationship with boundaries, you've tried them and you felt hurt before, it hasn't worked out, I'm going to invite you to actually lean into today's conversation and take on a new approach to how you might be setting your boundaries. Heal a bit of your relationship with them, because boundaries really are essential in having a life that you love, having the space to do the things you enjoy, and keeping out the behavior that really takes away from it. So with that, let's get started. Mistake number one is that you forget to set a boundary until it's already been crossed. And here's the dilemma. I know we'd love to think that our partners or our coworkers, they're mind readers. Like, of course they should know you have this boundary about your free time or your personal space, whatever. But the truth is, the people around us, they do not always know. They can't always predict with the crystal ball what our boundaries are. So it's actually our job, it's our leadership opportunity to go out and share at the top of relationships, or as often as a supportive, what your boundaries are. And I get that people feel resistant to this. I find in a world where a lot of us did not actually learn how to have boundaries growing up, and this behavior can feel new or can feel like we're entering a conflict. So I want you to consider reframing how you relate to boundary setting. Instead of just something you use to keep out the bad, consider that boundaries are really just an invitation and an instruction manual on how to support us and love us better, be it in romantic relationships, or how to support us so we can show up fully, authentically as ourselves in places like work or in our families. So I invite you really to challenge yourself to share boundaries more often, even make it casual. I can think of a few places this is especially relevant. If you're in a new working relationship, you might share at the top of it, when are you available to actually be talked to? If you get emails, when are you going to be available to respond? When are you definitely not available for work-related communications? I know for me, in my first few jobs, I used to be praised for working beyond my regular hours and not even being paid overtime for it, which, mind you, feels very illegal. But secondly, it's simply not healthy for me to always be working for nothing when I really needed more rest. So when we share at the top of relationships, we actually invite people to support our boundaries, to understand really that we're not available so they know when they can talk to us and when they can't. They won't be, making decisions in the dark, crossing our boundaries and upsetting us because they didn't know. And it also gives them a chance to clarify what are their boundaries. The cool thing when we share boundaries at the top of a relationship is other people feel empowered to do the same. Now, the second mistake I see people make is that we forget setting boundaries isn't just about keeping out the negative. It's also about making room and protecting room for the positive of what we want. I invite people to look at boundaries in one of two ways. A, what are the experiences you do not want to have, the conversations that aren't healthy or supportive, or the behaviors that don't support your well-being? And I feel like that's where most of us automatically come from when we think about boundaries. But part two is looking at really what are the experiences that add to your life? What you need to feel healthy, to have fun, to really thrive. And just for your heart's desire, what do you want more of in your life? Then ask yourself this question: what boundaries would actually help you reliably have just that? When I think about myself, I know when I first began my business, I was not actually reliable to make ample time to relax, to rest, and to have fun with my friends. But when I look back at my well-being, when I did have that fun, I always felt more excited to come back to work. I had new ideas. I felt like I had a fuller life. I felt more connected. I felt nourished. So by not creating boundaries that let me have fun with my friends, be it on the dance floor or taking vacations or whatnot, I was actually undermining my own well-being. You might look at too, what are the experiences you want to protect that really support you and fill up your cup even on the daily? These days I have a very quiet, slow, cozy morning ritual because that is what fills up my cup. It also fuels me for my work day. It leaves me feeling really good. It's exactly what my heart wants. And I also have 2 days in the month set aside to focus on things like paying bills and designing the next life of my business so that on the days that aren't those, I get to really focus on being in my business, working with my clients, enjoying my life, and not distracted by the what I need to focus on or is there a bill outstanding. I always have it set. I have time set aside to focus on the essentials that keep my engines running, so I also can focus on living life and enjoying it fully on the days when I'm not focused on that. Now, I do want to highlight, this is an especially big one when it comes to relationships. If you want to grow your relationships, whether it's romantic or with like a co-founder for a startup, consider coming back to the boundaries around protecting the things you want to build more of often. And I mean like regularly, every other week, if not every week. Hey, are we making time for actually going out on adventures and having new experiences? Are we making time for having intimacy, having sex, having fun? Are we making time to ensure that our foundation is really strong? If we don't actually have these conversations on the regular, it's common for actually us to drop those balls. And these are the things that are essential to building up a thriving relationship that feels passionate, that feels purposeful, and also that has you weaving back together and growing in unison, even when life has you attempting to grow apart, which is natural, it's normal. But really checking in on what you're protecting as an entity, as a couple, can be very, very supportive, especially if you're moving into a new phase of life, you have a new child, you're trying out polyamory for the first time, whatever it might be. Boundaries focused on the positive are an essential keystone that I really recommend you return back to often. Now, the final mistake is I find a lot of people will share an actual boundary, but will forget to then share the consequence because it might feel icky. It feels hard to tell somebody you love, hey, here's my boundary, and if you crossed it, here's what's going to go down. But I implore you to think about it a little bit differently. If we don't share a consequence to a boundary, sometimes we aren't sharing fully the severity of what this boundary means to us, really what's at risk on our side of the court. And we also then put the onus back on us if another person crosses our boundaries to figure out in that moment, well, what is the consequence? What is a worthy consequence? What could it be? And hey, if you have any amount of people pleasing in you, which, codependency or people pleasing, I feel like everyone's a little bit of that, no matter what your background was, it can be especially challenging when a boundary is crossed to not fall back into old patterns of caretaking for a partner, for trying to make them feel better when they feel bad because they hurt you and crossed your boundary. It's not your job to do that. So sharing a consequence when you share a boundary is actually a way of empowering yourself to have a firm boundary that works for you and empowers the other person to know what they're choosing, because it really is their choice to cross your boundary, what they're choosing by doing so or by respecting your boundary. It's no longer a question of, well, what if I do? Is it real or is it not? We just say, hey, The consequence is if you keep bringing up this topic, I'm going to hang up the phone. Would love to talk to you about other stuff. Not available for that conversation. Sound clear? Cool. Or something else along the lines of if it's in a different kind of relationship, romantically, whatever it might be in your business relationships. So an invitation is this. When you share a boundary, be clear about what it is and how it supports you, and also share in that moment flatly the consequence if it is crossed. When it comes to work relationships, I might share that I'm not available to talk Saturday through Monday. These are my days to take off to nourish myself. So consequence if they call or email me then is they're not going to get a response until Tuesday. So just know that's what's going on. And if they keep doing that, we're probably going to drop balls in their project. So please focus on what they can, and they know that you're not available so they can actually run their lives more effectively too. Consequences are not necessarily a bad thing. I think we have a lot of stories around a consequence being negative or harmful, but really sharing a consequence gives another person more agency to choose in a way that supports you and supports them. And if they do cross a boundary, they get to look at it and realize, hey, that's their thing to own, right? They didn't just choose to cross a boundary, they chose that consequence for themselves. And that can be very healing in relationships to have set up too. So recognize a boundary alone is an awesome step. Really, they're essential to growing a great life. And a boundary with a consequence can be even more fortifying for the life and the relationships you want to have. So with that said, those are the top 3 mistakes I see people make when it comes to setting boundaries. And I hope that this tutorial was useful and supportive for you. If you have any other ideas, strategies that have worked for you when it's come to setting your own boundaries, please put them in the comment section below. Let's all grow and heal together. With that said, I will see you next time. I hope you all have an awesome week.